Senior analyst Kethra Voss had served at the Imperial Early Warning Station for 30 years. She had seen comets, asteroid swarms, and the occasional pirate fleet trying to sneak through the dark spaces between stars. Nothing had ever made her hands shake. Nothing had ever made her question her own instruments. Until now. The screen in front of her showed something that could not exist. Ships were emerging from fold space at the galaxy's edge. Not dozens, not hundreds. Thousands upon thousands of vessels poured out of the darkness like water from a broken dam. Her instruments counted them automatically, and the numbers climbed so fast she could barely follow. 10,000, 20,000, 30,000. The count kept rising. Kethra's assistant, a young male named Torin, stood beside her with his mouth hanging open. Neither of them spoke. What could they possibly say? 47,000 ships now filled the space beyond the Imperial border. They hung there in perfect formation, each vessel holding its exact position relative to the others. No drift, no adjustment, just absolute stillness, like a painted picture of a fleet rather than a real one, and the size of them. Kethra had served aboard Imperial dreadnoughts during the border wars. Those ships had seemed like mountains floating in space. The smallest vessel in this unknown fleet made those dreadnoughts look like toys. The largest ones were so big that her instruments struggled to calculate their dimensions. Some appeared to have their own gravity wells, their own weather systems. "Get me high command," Kethra said. Her voice came out as a whisper. She cleared her throat and tried again. "Get me high command, now." The message took 4 hours to reach the Imperial throne world. The response came in 12 minutes, carried by priority channels that burned through relay stations like fire through dry grass. Fleet Admiral Torvan himself appeared on her screen, his weathered face tight with controlled fear. "Show me everything," he said. Kethra sent the data. She watched the Admiral's expression change as he processed the information. First disbelief, then confusion, then something that looked almost like relief, though she could not understand why. "The architects," Torvan said quietly, "they have returned." Kethra felt her blood turn cold. Every child in the Empire grew up hearing stories about the architects, the ancient race that had built the hyperspace gates, the beings who had created wonders across 1,000 worlds before vanishing 1,000,000 years ago. Their ruins still dotted the galaxy, filled with technology no one could understand or replicate. If the architects had returned to reclaim their domain, the Empire would not survive the week. "Admiral," she said carefully, "we have no confirmation of—" "What else could they be?" Torvan interrupted. "Look at those ships. Look at the technology. No species in the known galaxy could build such things. No species we have encountered in 12,000 years of expansion." He shook his head slowly. "Begin evacuation protocols for all border systems. I will convene the Imperial War Council." The connection ended. Kethra stared at the blank screen for a long moment, then turned back to the image of the impossible fleet. Torn was still standing there, his young face pale with terror. "The architects," he whispered, "we're all going to die." "Perhaps," Kethra said, "but perhaps not. These ships have made no aggressive moves. They simply appeared and stopped. If they wanted us dead, we would already be dead." She began running deeper analysis on the fleet's energy signatures, power generation methods she could not identify, shield frequencies that operated on principles the Empire had only theorized about, communication signals encrypted in ways that made no sense. But buried in those signals, she found something strange, a carrier wave that seemed almost familiar, old, primitive even. "Torin," she said slowly, "come look at this." The young analyst leaned over her shoulder. Together they watched as she stripped away the layers of encryption, digging down to the base signal underneath. It was weak, barely detectable, but it was definitely there. Sound, audio transmission, a method of communication so ancient that most species had abandoned it millions of years ago. Kethra cleaned up the signal and played it through her station's speakers. A voice emerged. Not the clicking speech of the Valorians, not the harmonic tones of the Deleth, or the subsonic rumbles of the Krath. This was something else entirely. A single voice rising and falling in patterns that suggested meaning, wrapped around sounds that might have been music. The voice was singing. "What is that?" Torrin asked. Kethra did not answer immediately. She was running the audio through her translation database, searching for any match. The computer found nothing in its primary files, nothing in its secondary archives, nothing in the records of any known species. Then it found a match in the quarantine files. She stared at the result, read it twice, read it 3 times. Each time, the answer remained the same. "That's impossible," she breathed. "What?" Torrin demanded. "What is it?" Kethra pulled up a file she had never seen before, a file marked with the highest classification the Empire possessed, a file that had been locked away for 200 years and forgotten by everyone except the automated systems that maintained it. Sol Quarantine Zone. Species human. Status contained. 200 years ago, Kethra said, her voice sounding strange to her own ears. The Empire encountered a primitive species in a distant arm of the galaxy. They had just discovered nuclear power. They were barely capable of traveling between planets in their own solar system. They were judged to be dangerous and unpredictable, so the Empire quarantined them, blocked their entire star system. Forgot about them. She turned to face Torrin. Her hands had stopped shaking. Now they were completely numb. "That fleet," she said, pointing at the image of 47,000 impossible ships. "That fleet is human." Torrin laughed. It was a short, sharp sound with no humor in it. "That's ridiculous. A primitive species from a single star system building a fleet like that in 200 years? It takes the Empire a century to design a new class of battleship. It took us 3,000 years to develop fold space travel. What you're suggesting is impossible," Kethra agreed. "And yet," she played the audio signal again. The human voice sang on, carrying across the vast emptiness of space, reaching out from ships that dwarfed anything the Empire had ever built. "We need to inform High Command," Torrin said. "Yes." Kethra began preparing the transmission. "Though I suspect they will not believe us, I barely believe it myself." As she worked, she kept one eye on the fleet. 47,000 ships, hanging silent and still at the edge of Imperial space. They had made no aggressive moves. They had not responded to any hails. They simply waited. What were they waiting for? Kethra thought about what she knew of humans from the quarantine file. Aggressive, adaptable, creative in ways that made Imperial scientists uncomfortable. They had captured 2 Imperial scouts within a week of first contact and reverse-engineered their technology almost immediately. The Empire had looked at that and seen a threat to be contained. Perhaps they should have seen something else. A warning, a preview of what this species could become if pushed into a corner and left there for 2 centuries. The transmission was ready. Kethra sent it to High Command with her analysis attached. Then she sat back in her chair and watched the fleet. Somewhere out there, among those impossible ships, humans were waiting. An entire species that the Empire had locked away and forgotten. A species that had apparently spent 200 years preparing for this moment. The singing continued. Kethra did not understand the words, but she thought she understood the message. "We are here. We remember. We are not what you thought we were." The question now was simple. What did humanity want? And more importantly, what would the Empire do when it found out? High Command would convene. Admirals would argue. Politicians would make speeches. The Emperor himself would probably get involved. Decisions would be made by powerful people in comfortable rooms far from the border. But Kethra knew, with a certainty she could not explain, that the real decision had already been made, not by the Empire, by the humans. Whatever happened next, it would happen on their terms. The Empire had spent 12,000 years as the dominant power in the galaxy. They had conquered hundreds of species. They had never faced an equal. Looking at those 47,000 ships, Kethra suspected they were not facing an equal now either. They were facing something far worse. She saved her analysis and began preparing for the long night ahead. Somewhere in the distance, the human fleet waited. The singing had stopped. Silence filled the space between stars. The galaxy held its breath. 200 years earlier, the Imperial survey vessel Dutiful Observer entered the Sol system with all the confidence of a giant walking into a garden. Commander Vreth Salon had made first contact with dozens of primitive species during his career. The process was always the same: arrive in overwhelming force, demonstrate superior technology, extend the offer of Imperial membership, which was really just a polite way of saying submission. Most species accepted immediately. The few that resisted learned quickly that resistance was pointless. The species on the third planet from the yellow sun seemed unremarkable at first glance. They called themselves humans. They had just discovered how to split atoms and were using this knowledge mostly to threaten each other with weapons of mass destruction. Their space technology was laughable. They had barely visited their own moon. Standard primitive civilization. Standard first contact procedure. Commander Solon sent 2 scouts to establish communication. They landed in an unpopulated area and began setting up the translation equipment that would allow dialogue with local leaders. Within 6 days, both scouts were dead. Not killed in combat, not destroyed by primitive weapons. The humans had captured them, taken them apart piece by piece, and learned everything they could from the remains. They reverse-engineered the translator implants in less than a week. By the time Solon realized something was wrong, humans were already broadcasting messages on Imperial frequencies. The messages were simple, direct, unsettling. "We know you are watching. We know what you are. Come down and talk, or stay up there and wait. Either way, we will be ready." Solon requested guidance from High Command. The response took 3 weeks to arrive. When it did, it came with the highest priority classification. Species deemed excessively adaptive, threat potential, extreme, recommended action, quarantine. The Empire did not want to destroy humans. Destruction was expensive and time-consuming, and there were easier ways to handle problematic species. Instead, they built a wall. Warning buoys surrounded the Sol system. Patrol ships maintained constant watch. Any human vessel attempting to leave would be destroyed. The message was clear. Stay in your cage, little creatures. Grow old. Die. Be forgotten. The Empire moved on to other concerns. Wars were fought. Territories expanded. New species were encountered and absorbed. 2 centuries passed like drops of water falling into an ocean. No one checked on the humans. Why would they? A primitive species trapped in a single star system could not possibly develop into a threat. The math simply did not support it. The math, as it turned out, was wrong. In the present day, Ambassador Seleth Kaur traveled toward the unknown fleet in a diplomatic shuttle. She had been chosen for this mission because she was expendable enough to risk, but experienced enough to perhaps survive. Her orders were simple: make contact, gather information, return alive if possible. Her shuttle approached the nearest vessel in the human formation. As she drew closer, the scale of the ship became impossible to ignore. It was not just large, it was a world unto itself. She could see structures on its surface that might have been cities. Lights moved in patterns that suggested organized activity on a massive scale. Her shuttle received a docking invitation. Coordinates appeared on her navigation display. She followed them into a hangar bay that could have held 1,000 Imperial warships with room to spare. When she stepped out of her shuttle, a human was waiting for her. Seleth had seen images of humans in the ancient quarantine files. Bipedal, relatively small, soft-skinned, fragile-looking. The woman who stood before her matched those descriptions, but there was something in her eyes that the files had not captured. A depth, a weight, the look of someone who had seen too much and decided to keep going anyway. "Ambassador Kaur," the human said in perfect Imperial standard, "I am Admiral Chen Wei-Lin of the United Human Expeditionary Force. Welcome aboard the Remembrance." Seleth's translator was working, but she barely needed it. The human spoke her language with native fluency. How was that possible? "Admiral Chen," she replied carefully, "I have been sent to establish communication between your fleet and the Valorian Empire." "We know." Chen smiled. It was a small expression, barely a movement of her lips, but it contained something that made Seleth deeply uncomfortable. "We have been monitoring your communication since we arrived. Your high command is quite concerned about us. Some of your admirals are arguing for immediate military action. Others want to negotiate. Your emperor has not yet made a decision." Seleth felt cold fear spread through her chest. They could intercept Imperial communications. They could decode Imperial encryption. What else could they do? "You seem to know a great deal about us," she said. We had 200 years to prepare. Chen gestured for Seleth to follow her. We knew this day would come eventually, the day we would break free of our quarantine and face the civilization that imprisoned us. We wanted to be ready. They walked through corridors that seemed to stretch forever. Seleth saw humans everywhere, working at stations she could not understand, maintaining systems she could not identify. They looked at her with curiosity, but not hostility. Some even nodded in greeting. Your technology, Seleth said. How is this possible? 200 years ago, you had barely reached your own moon. Necessity, Chen replied. When you learn that a vast empire has locked you in a cage and thrown away the key, you find motivation. Every human alive today grew up knowing that we were prisoners. Every scientist, every engineer, every dreamer bent their efforts toward one goal: freedom. She stopped in front of a large window. Beyond it, Seleth could see the Imperial border. She could see the early warning stations. She could probably see her own homeworld if she looked hard enough. We did not just catch up to your technology, Chen continued. We surpassed it, by 3 generations at least. Possibly more. We are still discovering what we can do. Seleth stared at the view. Her mind struggled to process what she was hearing. 3 generations ahead of Imperial technology. That meant weapons the Empire could not counter, defenses the Empire could not penetrate, speed the Empire could not match. What do you want? She asked. Chen turned to face her. That weight in her eyes seemed heavier now. We want to talk, she said. We want to understand why the Empire looked at our species and decided we should be locked away forever. We want to know if you feared us because of what we had done or because of what you knew we could become. And if we cannot give you satisfactory answers. Chen did not respond immediately. She looked out the window at the stars, at the vast empire that had tried to contain her people. We have 47,000 ships, and she said finally. Each one carries weapons that could sterilize a planet. We have the power to destroy the Valorian Empire completely. We could end 12,000 years of history in a matter of weeks. She turned back to Seleth. Her expression was calm, almost gentle. But we do not want destruction. We did not spend 2 centuries building this fleet so we could become conquerors. We built it so we could never be conquered again. There is a difference. Seleth found that she believed her. There was something in the human's voice that spoke of exhaustion and determination in equal measure. The weight of a species that had suffered imprisonment and emerged stronger rather than broken. We want peace, Chen said. Real peace, not the peace of submission that the Empire offers its subjects. A peace between equals, a conversation instead of a conquest. The Empire has never negotiated with equals, Seleth replied. We do not know how. Then perhaps it is time to learn. Chen smiled again, and this time there was warmth in it. Real warmth, despite everything. We have much to teach each other, Ambassador, if we choose to learn. Seleth thought about the report she would have to send back to High Command. She thought about the panic it would cause, the fear, the desperate scrambling for solutions that did not exist. She also thought about what Chen had said, a peace between equals, a conversation instead of a conquest. It sounded impossible. It sounded naive. But looking at this human woman, standing in a ship that should not exist, representing a species that should not have survived, Seleth began to wonder if perhaps the impossible was exactly what the galaxy needed. I will deliver your message, she said. Thank you. Chen nodded. And please tell your emperor something else. Tell him that we remember being locked away. We remember every year, every generation that lived and died as prisoners. We have not forgotten. She paused. But we have also not let that memory poison us. We could have come here with hatred in our hearts. We chose differently. We hope the Empire will choose differently as well. Seleth returned to her shuttle. As she flew back toward Imperial space, she watched the human fleet grow smaller in her rear display. 47,000 ships, countless weapons, power beyond anything the Empire had ever faced, and at its heart, a species that had been wronged and was offering forgiveness anyway. She began composing her report. She had no idea how to explain what she had learned. She only knew that the galaxy would never be the same. The humans had returned, and they were nothing like what anyone expected. Ambassador Seleth Kaur's report reached High Command in the middle of the night. By morning, it had spread to every corner of the Imperial government, By noon, it had leaked to the public. By evening, the Empire was in chaos. Fleet Admiral Torvan stood before the War Council, his face grim. Around him sat the most powerful military minds in the galaxy. None of them had slept. None of them had answers. "The analysis is complete," Torvan said. "Ambassador Kor's assessment was accurate. The human fleet possesses technology at least 3 generations beyond our most advanced systems. Their shields can withstand anything we throw at them. Their weapons can penetrate any defense we have. Their ships are faster, more maneuverable, and more numerous than anything we can field." He paused. The weight of his next words seemed to press down on his shoulders. "If they choose to attack, we cannot stop them." Silence filled the chamber. 12,000 years of imperial dominance, countless victories, an empire that stretched across 3/4 of the known galaxy. And now they faced a species they had dismissed as primitive, trapped, irrelevant. Admiral Krethos, commander of the 3rd Battle Fleet, broke the silence. "Then we strike first. Before they can act, we pour everything we have into a single devastating assault. Even if we cannot destroy them, we can hurt them enough to—" "To what?" interrupted Admiral Senna, one of the few voices of caution on the council. "To make them angry? They have offered peace. They have shown restraint. If we attack first, we confirm every fear they must have about us." "They were prisoners," Krethos snapped. "We locked them away for 2 centuries. You think they do not already hate us? This talk of peace is a trick, a distraction while they position their forces." "Then why haven't they attacked already?" Senna demanded. "They appeared a week ago. They could have pushed through our border defenses like paper. Instead, they sit and wait. They talk. They send ambassadors rather than armies." The argument continued. It would continue for hours, for days. The council was split between those who wanted war and those who wanted negotiation. Neither side had any real idea how to achieve their goals. Meanwhile, the human fleet did something unexpected. A colony world called Vareth Prime had been suffering from a plague for 6 months. The disease killed slowly and painfully. Imperial medical science had no cure. Ships had been diverted, resources allocated, but nothing worked. The population of 2 billion was watching itself die 1 citizen at a time. 3 human medical vessels appeared in Vareth Prime's orbit without warning. They did not ask for permission. They did not negotiate terms. They simply announced that they had a cure and began distributing it to the surface. The planetary governor, a proud Valorian named Keth Marath, demanded they leave. He threatened to fire on their ships. He accused them of trickery, of trying to poison his people. The humans ignored him. They worked day and night, moving from city to city, treating everyone they could find. Their medical technology was so advanced that it seemed like magic. Patients who had been hours from death recovered completely within days. 6 days after the human ships arrived, the plague was gone. Not contained, not reduced, gone completely. The human vessels left without asking for payment, gratitude, or acknowledgement. They simply returned to their fleet and resumed their silent vigil at the border. News of the Vareth Prime miracle spread across the galaxy like wildfire. The Empire had abandoned that colony to die. The humans, the species the Empire had imprisoned, had saved them for no apparent reason. The political implications were enormous. Subject species began to whisper. The Deleth, who had been conquered 3,000 years ago, wondered aloud if the humans might be liberators. The Krath, who had been forced into slavery in the Imperial mines, began dreaming of freedom. Even some Valorians questioned whether their empire deserved to survive if this was how it treated both enemies and subjects. Emperor Vethros III addressed the situation from his throne room. He was old, his scales faded with age, but his voice still carried the weight of absolute authority. "These humans are attempting to undermine our civilization," he declared. "Their gifts are poison. Their kindness is a weapon. Do not be fooled by their actions at Vareth Prime. They seek to turn our subjects against us, to weaken us from within before they strike." Many believed him, many more did not. Admiral Chen Wei-Lin requested permission to address the galactic media. The Empire could not stop her. Their communications were compromised. Their information networks were open to her. She could have broadcast anything she wanted at any time. Instead, she asked politely, And the emperor, fearing what might happen if he refused, granted her request. She appeared on screens across the galaxy, a single human woman, standing alone, speaking to trillions of viewers. I want to tell you about my species, she began. We are not ancient. We are not powerful by nature. We are not special in any way that matters. She paused, looking directly into the recording device. We have fought wars among ourselves that killed hundreds of millions. We have committed atrocities that still haunt us. We have destroyed our own environment out of greed and ignorance. We are capable of terrible things. Another pause. Her expression grew softer. But we are also capable of love, of sacrifice, of choosing to be better than we were. When the Empire locked us away, we could have spent 2 centuries nursing our hatred. We could have built this fleet for revenge. Many of us wanted to. She shook her head slowly. But we chose differently. We decided that we did not want to become what we hated. We built our fleet to ensure our survival, not to ensure anyone else's destruction. We have the power to crush the Empire. We do not have the desire. She spread her hands, a gesture of openness. We want peace, real peace. Not submission, but partnership. Not conquest, but cooperation. We know this seems impossible after everything that has happened. We know you have reason to fear us, and we have reason to hate you. Her voice hardened slightly. But hatred is a prison worse than any quarantine zone. It traps you inside yourself. It makes you smaller, weaker, less than what you could be. We refuse to be trapped. We hope you will refuse as well. The broadcast ended. The galaxy had much to discuss. In the Imperial Intelligence Headquarters, a small group of officers gathered in secret. They had watched Chen's broadcast with growing fury. They did not believe her words. They could not accept that any species would offer mercy from a position of such overwhelming strength. Senior Director Keth Varan led the group. He was old, paranoid, and absolutely certain that the humans were planning something terrible. They're manipulating us, he said. Every move they make is calculated. The healing of Verath Prime, this broadcast. They want us soft and confused when they finally strike. His subordinates nodded. They shared his suspicions, his fears, his determination. We cannot wait for the War Council to act, Varan continued. By the time they finish arguing, the humans will have already won. We need to remind them that the Empire is not helpless. We need to show them that we can hurt them. He pulled up an image of a human cruiser. It was one of the smaller vessels in the fleet, isolated from the main formation. We have a weapon, he said. An old prototype. Unreliable, dangerous, but powerful enough to threaten even their shields. I propose we test it. The officers exchanged glances. What Varan was suggesting was treason. He was proposing an unauthorized military strike that could start a war the Empire had no hope of winning, but they were afraid, and fear makes people do terrible things. Proceed, one of them said. The order was given. A single Imperial strike craft, carrying an experimental weapon, launched toward the human fleet. Across the border, 47,000 ships waited. They detected the incoming attack immediately. They tracked its trajectory, analyzed its payload, prepared their response. Admiral Chen received the report in her quarters. She looked at the data for a long moment. Then she sighed, deeply and sadly. Let them try, she said, and when they fail, we will see what kind of species they truly are. The strike craft reached its target. The experimental weapon fired. Nothing happened. The human ship's shields absorbed the attack without flickering. The energy simply vanished, swallowed by defensive systems that operated on principles the Empire could not even imagine. Now the galaxy waited. The Empire had attacked. The humans had proven they could not be harmed. What would happen next would determine the future of every species in existence. The Empire held its breath. News of the unauthorized attack spread through high command within hours. Senior Director Varan and his co-conspirators were arrested, though that hardly mattered. The damage was done. The Empire had struck at the human fleet, and now everyone waited to see how humanity would respond. Admiral Torvan sent an emergency message to the human flagship. It was part apology, part desperate plea. We did not authorize this attack. The perpetrators are in custody. Please do not retaliate against our civilian populations. The response came quickly. A single sentence, Admiral Chen requests a meeting with Emperor Vethros III. She will come alone and unarmed. The War Council erupted in argument. Some saw this as an opportunity to capture or kill the human commander. Others warned that any treachery would doom the Empire. Still others could not understand why Chen would risk herself this way. Emperor Vethros made the decision himself. He would meet with the human admiral. He would hear what she had to say, and he would try to find some way to save his civilization from the destruction it had brought upon itself. Chen's shuttle arrived at the Imperial throne world 3 days later. She emerged alone as promised. No weapons, no guards, no backup of any kind. She placed herself entirely at the mercy of people who had every reason to kill her. The Emperor's guards escorted her through the ancient halls of the Imperial Palace. Statues of conquering heroes lined the walls. Murals depicted victories over countless species. 12,000 years of domination, frozen in art and stone. Chen looked at all of it. Her expression revealed nothing. The throne room was vast. Pillars of carved stone reached toward a ceiling that disappeared into shadow. At the far end, Emperor Vethros sat upon a seat of polished obsidian, surrounded by advisors and guards. Chen walked the length of the room alone. Her footsteps echoed in the silence. Every eye watched her. Every guard held their weapon ready. One word from the Emperor, and she would die. She stopped before the throne and bowed her head slightly. Not deep enough to suggest submission, just enough to acknowledge the Emperor's position. "Your Majesty," she said, "thank you for agreeing to meet with me." Vethros studied her for a long moment. He had ruled the Empire for 200 years. He had faced rebellions, invasions, and assassination attempts. He had never faced anything like this. "You risked much by coming here," he said finally. "One of my admirals has already suggested that we kill you and use your death to demoralize your fleet." "Yes," Chen agreed. "I assumed someone would suggest that. I came anyway." "Why?" Chen looked up at him. Her eyes held no fear, no anger, just a deep, weary determination. "Because someone had to take the first step," she said. "Your people attacked us. You had every reason to expect retaliation. Instead, I came here to talk. I wanted to show you that revenge is not the only response to being wronged." Vethros leaned forward. "Your fleet could destroy us. You have said so yourself. Why show mercy to an enemy you have already defeated?" "Because we do not want you as an enemy." Chen's voice remained calm, measured. "We spent 200 years as prisoners of the Valorian Empire. Every human alive today grew up in a cage you built. We have reasons to hate you, good reasons, justified reasons." She paused. "But hatred is exhausting. It consumes everything it touches. If we had built our fleet for revenge, we would have become something ugly, something we did not want to be. So we made a different choice. We built our fleet for protection, not destruction, for freedom, not conquest." "You expect me to believe that?" Vethros demanded. "No species in history has possessed such power and refused to use it. Strength demands expression. It is the nature of things." "Is it?" Chen shook her head. "Perhaps that is why the galaxy has been ruled by empires for so long. Perhaps that is why wars never end. Why species are conquered and enslaved. Why the strong always crush the weak. Because everyone believes that power must be used. That mercy is weakness. That peace is impossible." She stepped closer to the throne. The guards tensed, but Vethros raised a hand to stop them. "We believe differently," Chen continued. "We think that true strength is shown by what you choose not to do. Any fool can destroy, any tyrant can conquer. But building something lasting, creating a peace that actually works, that requires more courage than all the weapons in the galaxy." Vethros was silent for a long moment. The weight of centuries pressed down on him. He had been emperor for so long that he could barely remember being anything else. His entire identity was built on dominance, on the assumption that power must be exercised or lost. And here stood a representative of a force that could annihilate his empire, asking for friendship instead. "What do you want?" he asked. His voice was quieter now, less certain. "We want you to stop being afraid," Chen said. "Fear made you lock us away 2 centuries ago. Fear made your intelligence officers attack us last week. Fear is the poison that runs through your entire civilization. driving you to conquer and control because you cannot imagine any other way to be safe. She spread her hands. We are not here to replace one empire with another. We do not want subjects. We do not want slaves. We want partners. We want a galaxy where species work together instead of dominating each other, where strength is used to build rather than destroy. Such a thing has never existed, Vethros said. No, Chen agreed. It hasn't. That's why we have to create it. The Emperor sat back on his throne. For the first time in centuries, he looked old, tired, uncertain. My people will not accept this easily, he said. Many of them have spent their entire lives believing that power must be maintained through force. They will see your mercy as weakness. They will try to exploit it. We know. Chen nodded. Change is never easy. It takes time, patience, and a willingness to keep trying even when things go wrong. We are prepared for that. And if we refuse, if we choose to fight, even though we cannot win, Chen's expression grew sad. Then you will lose. We will defend ourselves. We will destroy your fleets, dismantle your military infrastructure, and remove your capacity to threaten us or anyone else. But we will not exterminate you. We will not enslave you. Even in defeat, we will offer you the same thing we are offering now, a chance to be something better. Vethros stared at her. He had faced countless enemies in his long reign. Some had been brave. Some had been clever. None had been like this. None had offered him mercy when they held all the power. He did not know how to respond. His entire framework for understanding the universe had been built on a simple truth. The strong rule, the weak submit. The humans had shattered that truth into pieces, and he did not know how to put it back together. I need time, he said finally, to think, to consult with my advisors, to understand what you are truly offering. Of course, Chen bowed her head again. We have waited 200 years. We can wait a little longer. She turned to leave, then paused. One more thing, Your Majesty. The officers who attacked our ship, Director Voron and his conspirators. They will face justice, of course, but please do not execute them. Vethros frowned. They committed an act of war against your fleet. By imperial law, treason of that magnitude demands death. I know. Chen looked back at him. But we are trying to build something new. Something that does not answer every wrong with more violence. Let them live. Let them see what the galaxy becomes. Perhaps someday they will understand why we chose differently. She walked out of the throne room, alone and unguarded, leaving the most powerful being in the galaxy struggling to understand what had just happened. Vethros sat in silence for a long time after she left. His advisors spoke to him, but he barely heard them. He was thinking about cages, about fear, about the choice between what he had always done and what he might become. For the first time in 200 years, the Emperor of the Valorian Empire was not certain of anything. And somewhere in the depths of the imperial palace, a group of nobles who refused to accept mercy gathered in secret. They had access to weapons the Emperor did not know about. Ancient weapons left behind by the architects themselves. If they could not defeat the humans through strength, they would destroy them through desperation. The planet killer beneath the throne world hummed quietly, waiting for its moment. The weapon fired without warning. Deep beneath the imperial throne world, the architect device that had lain dormant for 1,000,000 years came to life. A beam of compressed, dark energy erupted from the planet's surface, punched through the atmosphere, and raced towards Sol at speeds that made light seem slow. The nobles who activated it watched the readings with satisfaction. The weapon would reach Earth in less than 2 hours. It would destroy the human homeworld completely. Every city, every ocean, every trace of life would be vaporized in an instant. Without their homeworld, surely the human fleet would crumble. Surely the species would be broken. Admiral Chen was still on the Imperial throne world when she received the alert. She was being escorted back to her shuttle when her communicator activated with an emergency signal that cut through all other communications. She stopped walking. The guards around her noticed the change in her posture and stepped back nervously. "Admiral," one of them asked. Chen did not respond immediately. She was reading the data streaming across her display, the weapon's trajectory, its speed, its target. She calculated arrival time. probable damage, potential countermeasures. For a long moment, she was completely still. Then she closed her eyes and took a single, deep breath. "I need to speak with your emperor," she said. "Now." The guards hesitated. Protocol demanded that she return to her shuttle. Protocol demanded that she leave Imperial space immediately. But there was something in her voice that made Protocol seem very small and unimportant. They brought her back to the throne room. Emperor Vethros was already there, surrounded by panicking advisors. Alarms were sounding throughout the palace. The architect weapons activation had triggered sensors that had been silent for millennia. No one knew exactly what was happening, but everyone knew it was bad. Chen walked through the chaos without hesitation. She stopped before the emperor and met his eyes. "Some of your nobles have fired an architect weapon at Earth," she said. Her voice was steady, almost calm. "A planet killer. It will arrive in approximately 90 minutes. Vethros felt his world collapse around him. "That's not possible," he whispered. "No one has access to such weapons. No one even knows where." "Someone did." Chen's expression did not change. "Someone who decided that if they could not control the future, they would destroy it instead." She turned and looked out the throne room's great windows. Somewhere beyond the stars, a beam of death was racing toward her people, toward her planet, toward everything humanity had built in their 2 centuries of isolation. "We knew this might happen," she said quietly. "We knew that somewhere, someone would refuse to accept peace. We prepared for it." She activated her communicator. Her voice carried across all channels, reaching every ship in the human fleet, every station, every relay. "This is Admiral Chen. Earth is under attack. Activate the Aegis Protocol." Across the galaxy, humanity responded. The human fleet did not move toward Earth. They did not need to. Earth could defend itself. It had been defending itself for 200 years, ever since the first human leaders realized that their quarantine might end in fire rather than freedom. The beam of dark energy crossed the void between stars. It was the most powerful weapon the architects had ever built, capable of destroying worlds with a single shot. Nothing in the known galaxy could stop it. Nothing except humanity. As the beam entered the Sol system, it encountered something unexpected. A network of defense platforms that had been hidden throughout the system, disguised as asteroids and debris. They activated simultaneously, creating a web of energy fields that caught the beam like a net catching a fish. The weapon's power was enormous. The defense network struggled to contain it. For several terrible seconds, it seemed like the platforms would fail, like Earth would burn, despite everything humanity had done to prepare. But they held. The beam's energy was captured, redirected, channeled through the defense network and funneled into the sun. Sol absorbed the attack without effect, its massive fusion reactions swallowing the dark energy like an ocean, swallowing a raindrop. Earth survived. Across the human fleet, cheers erupted. Relief and joy and pride mixed together into something that felt like hope. Admiral Chen received the news on the Imperial throne world. She closed her eyes for a moment, allowing herself to feel the weight lift from her shoulders. Then she opened them and turned back to face the Emperor. "My world is safe," she said. "Your weapon failed." Vethros could not speak. He could not move. Everything he thought he knew about power and survival had been proven wrong. The humans had expected betrayal. They had prepared for it. And they had survived. "We could retaliate," Chen continued. "We could use our fleet to destroy your throne world, your colonies, your entire species. We have that power. You know we do." The Emperor nodded slowly. What else could he do? "But we won't," Chen's voice carried across the silent throne room. "We are not going to become what we hate. We are not going to answer genocide with genocide. The nobles who fired that weapon will face justice. But their crime is their own, not yours. Not your species." She stepped forward and extended her hand, a human gesture of greeting, of peace, of trust. "We can still build something new," she said. "Something better. The choice is yours." The Emperor looked at her hand. He looked at the woman who represented a species he had wronged in ways he was only beginning to understand. He thought about 12,000 years of empire, of conquest, of fear. And then he reached out and took her hand. The galaxy changed in that moment. Not all at once, not easily. The transition would take years, decades, generations. There would be resistance and setbacks and moments when it seemed like the old ways would win after all. But humanity had shown something that the galaxy had never seen before. They had shown that power did not have to corrupt, that strength could be gentle, that mercy could win against hatred. Admiral Chen addressed the galaxy one final time. "We did not come here as conquerors," she said. "We came here as survivors. We learned something important during our 200 years of imprisonment. We learned that the universe does not care about power or pride or empire. It only cares about what you build and what you leave behind." She paused. Across countless worlds, billions of beings watched her speak. The Valorian Empire built something impressive, but it was built on fear and domination. We are offering something different, a partnership instead of a hierarchy, cooperation instead of conquest, a future where species work together instead of fighting over scraps. She smiled. It was a tired smile, but genuine. "We know this sounds impossible. We know you have reasons to doubt us. We ask only that you watch what we do, not just what we say. Judge us by our actions. Give peace a chance to prove itself." The broadcast ended. 3 months later, Emperor Vethros publicly announced the dissolution of the imperial system. Subject species would be granted self-governance. Quarantine zones would be eliminated. A new galactic council would be formed, with humanity as its founding partner. 6 months after that, the first human ambassadors arrived on former subject worlds. They brought technology, medical supplies, and offers of assistance. They asked for nothing in return except friendship. The transition was not perfect. Some species did not trust the humans. Some Valorians resisted the change. There were incidents, setbacks, moments of tension, but humanity kept its word. Every promise was fulfilled. Every treaty was honored. Slowly, painfully, the galaxy began to believe that something new was actually possible. Admiral Chen Wei-Lin returned to Earth after the peace was established. She visited a memorial garden in what had once been called Geneva, where monuments stood in memory of everyone who had lived and died under the quarantine. Generations of humans who had never seen the stars, who had never known freedom. She walked through the garden alone. Spring flowers bloomed around her. Birds sang in trees that humanity had almost destroyed in their early, reckless years. At the center of the garden stood a single monument, a simple stone pillar with names carved into its surface. Not the names of heroes or leaders, the names of ordinary people who had kept hoping, kept dreaming, kept believing that someday things would be better. Chen placed a flower at the base of the monument. She stood there for a long time, listening to the wind, feeling the sun on her face. "We made it," she whispered. "We found our way out of the cage. We crossed the stars. We faced an empire that wanted us dead." She touched the carved names gently. "And we didn't lose ourselves getting here. We stayed who we wanted to be. We proved that power doesn't have to destroy. We showed the galaxy that there's another way." The wind carried her words away. The flowers swayed gently. Somewhere above, the sky stretched endless and blue, leading out to stars that no longer seemed hostile. Humanity had faced the impossible and refused to become monsters. They had been given every reason to hate and chosen to love instead. They had been handed the power of gods and used it to build rather than destroy. The galaxy would never forget. Neither would humanity. This was who they were. This was who they chose to be. And it was enough.